There we go. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. We'll wait another minute or so whilst people join, and then we'll get started.
Hello everybody. While you're waiting for us to start, you could use the chat function, which you'll find at the bottom of the frame, of the black frame, simply to add your location so we know where everybody is. So if you like, just use the chat function and write where you are.
Got lots of locations coming in. We've got Poland, Oslo, Manchester.
It's faster than we can record. Scotland,
Belfast,
Bangkok, Chicago, Birmingham.
Netherlands.
Oh my God, Newcastle.
I think it's a global webinar today.
Yeah, Portugal, Salford, Poland, Bonn, Cardiff, Copenhagen, Manchester, Berlin, Amsterdam, Stockport, Colombia.
Wow, Isle of Wight, Moscow, sorry.
Gloucester, Newcastle again, Portrush, Northern Ireland, Portrush, Paris, this is little Riyadh, Utrecht, so we're just asking everybody who's entering now simply to use the chat function at the bottom of the black frame to tell us where they are, the locations. So another Athens and another Manchester. Dover, Windsor, Liverpool again.
We still have people joining, so I'll wait for one more minute and then we'll get started.
Let's wait a minute. London twice, Derbyshire, Stratford-upon-Avon, in Wales, Manchester again, Warrington, Berlin, so we have 127 attendees at the moment. We have about 200 people who've registered, and that's why we're waiting a bit while everybody's still joining. Bear with us. And for those who just came in, we just ask people to add their location in the chat function, which is at the bottom of the black frame, simply where you are, so we know, have a rough idea of where people are. So Manchester and London and Leicestershire and Kent, Liverpool and Corfu, Dublin, Sheffield, Manchester, San Diego, from the Peak District, Manchester, Belfast, Berlin, Newry, so Shona, what do you think if we give it a start? a little
Yeah,
bit?
I think so. We can get started. So firstly, welcome and thank you for joining us. As we can see from the chat, it's absolutely fantastic to have so many different countries represented on this international webinar. So we're really pleased that you could join us. Before we start, I just want to run through the functionality of Zoom. So I think a lot of you have started using the chat function at the bottom. So please feel free to use that throughout the webinar. You can add comments, talk to the panelists, talk to other attendees through the chat. The next function we'll be using is the Q&A box that you'll also see at the bottom. Now, this can be used for any specific questions that you have that you would like to ask the panel. If you have any questions throughout their discussions or at any point, if you put your questions in there, we'll keep an eye on that and we'll raise any questions when we pause for discussions. And the third function you'll see is raise your hand. So
By the way,
what
we
this
have a
means,
raised hand already, Shauna, at the moment. There's the 2 raised hands, and there's 1. Millie will be. Okay, there's just some people are trying it out, probably, the raised hands. All right.
yeah, I can see some raised hands there. So what this means is your microphone is muted just to help with background noise and to ensure that whilst the presenters are speaking, we can all hear them clearly. But if at any point you'd like to come on and speak rather than use some Q&A, if you'd like to share something with the group, ask a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring you in and we'll allow you to speak openly to the panel rather than through the Q&A. With that in mind, I just want to make everybody aware this webinar is recorded, so we will be sharing it afterwards. And also we'll be sharing the slides with everybody. And one more thing to let you know, if you are a member of the IPM, you will be eligible for CPD points for this webinar. You don't need to do anything. We'll track those points for you. We'll make sure that you get them. But this webinar is eligible for CPD. So just to make sure everybody can see these functions, can I ask you all to raise your hand just so I can see? I'm seeing some hands going up. There we go. I've got nearly 100 hands up, so I think you can all see this functions. So in that case, I'll hand you over to Aris. Thank you.
All right. We have 141 attendees at the moment, Shauna, which is fantastic. I don't know if you introduce yourself, Shauna Evans, who will be co-chairing with me today and help us take through the program. Welcome everybody. Welcome to people from all over the world who are joining us for this webinar. This is quite an exception for the IPM because we tend to do these seminars for our members, but we thought that since places around the world are in very similar situations and have to deal with the COVID pandemic and more than anything else, the fear of what is going to happen after the COVID pandemic, this would be a good opportunity to connect with people from all over the world, have 4 people from in different places say a couple of things at the beginning, so we have an introduction and we know how particular locations and dealing with it. And this is how we're going to proceed. We'll start with 4 short introductions that are going to be first by Michael Edwards in Chicago, then by Romy Schubert and Viola Krecker in Berlin, then Giovanna Codato from Ivrea, Italy will join us, and finally Billy Addy is going to join us from Liverpool. And I'll ask all 4 people to simply give a short introduction of what is happening in the cities, what they think the current situation is and what the situation in the future will be. While everybody's speaking, please feel free to use the Q&A function. We will, I'll together with Shauna, will try to go through the Q&A and pick some questions and see how we'll ask the panelists to discuss them afterwards. We'll have about a first half hour of Q&A, and then Simon Quinn, co-chair of the Institute of Place Management, will also give a short presentation and talk about the framework for recovery that we have developed at the IPM. And then we're going to have a second Q&A session right after that. Depending on how many questions we have and how many things you want to know, this webinar might take up to 2 hours maximum. If we're done earlier, we'll be done earlier. So this is our program. I will like to ask all four panelists to introduce themselves when they start. And for all the attendees, please feel free to ask your questions using the Q&A function while the panelists are speaking. So Michael, welcome.
Good morning from the beautiful city of Chicago and my daughter's bedroom. So thanks so much for being here today. Eris, thanks for the introduction. My name is Michael Edwards. I'm the president and CEO of the Chicago Loop Alliance. We are a full-service business improvement district, much like those on the Zoom call. We've been in lockdown here in Chicago since the middle of March 14th. We are expecting now to open on May 31st. We will hit our peak of the peak, they say, on May 15th. So 14 days later, it puts us around May 31st. So we are anticipating now getting back to something approaching a revitalization of downtown or a recovery around June 1st. I would say right now our downtown is working at about 20% capacity. We have the springboard pedestrian counters that many of you have, and we're down 81%, year over year. Our pedestrian counts are down, our vehicle counts are down. 80% seems to be the magic number in Chicago. So pedestrian counts, public transit counts, and vehicle counts are all down 80%, which makes me think that about 20% of the folks that are in the downtown are really essential workers. So we have a lot of essential workers that need to do a lot of things in and around the city. Our hotels and our venues are, of course, dismal at less than 10% occupancy, and even parking is down. So parking is down 4%. We are a full-service business improvement district. We have a $3.5 million budget, 7 staff. We provide services to about 20 block faces, largely on our retail or our high street, which is called State Street. And typically we have 325,000 people a day that come into the loop to work. And of course, nobody's here or have not been here for the last 8 weeks. As an organization, we have, and I know Simon's going to talk about this later, but we have found the IPM framework to be extremely helpful. So the first 2 months, March and April, was all about crisis. And this was all about establishing communication platforms like this with our leadership. This was all about assessing our programs, revising our budgets, and canceling all of our events really for 2020. We're now in what we call the pre-recovery period, which again is from IPM. And this is all about how we're going to pivot to deal with the new reality. So many of our safety programs and our clean programs have moved from litter and graffiti to disinfecting the environment. And then we're looking forward to September when we might get back to some kind of physical events of our own during what is called a recovery period. And we think at that point, the city might be operating at about 75% capacity. So if we're at 20% now, we're thinking maybe in the last quarter of the year, we'll be at 75%. And we're not looking for like total recovery until probably mid-2021. You know, what we're thinking about in terms of how it's going to affect our organization and the services that we deliver. If we were clean, safe, and fun, we're either now clean, safe, and cleaner, or we're going to be clean, safe, and healthy. I think healthy is the new capital. It's what people are looking for, whether you're a retailer, a hotel, a restaurant. People want to know that they're safe. And I think that that extends to the common area and the places that we participate in. And so we are now disinfecting everything. And we'll continue to do more of that into the future.
Michael, there is one question which you don't have to answer now, but
Sure.
just for you to know. The question is from Heather, who's asking, did you have any disaster crisis plan in place when the Chicago Loop Alliance was established? You can answer that during the session afterwards.
Sure.
All right, just keep that question in mind.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fine. All right, please let your questions come in while we can. Romy Schubert, would you like me to share the slides now and just tell me to click so that we can. All right. Can you all see the Berlin slide?
Yeah, we can see them.
Okay, sure. Romy, it's you. Please introduce yourself, and then we can start.
Yeah, thank you very much to talk about Berlin, about the situation. My name is Romy. I work for the BIT Kodam town scene. We established the first BIT in Berlin in 2018. And we just want to give a short timeline about the COVID-19 history. But very short, I promise. So you get a quick overview about the situation in Germany and in Berlin as well. And my colleague Viola will tell you more about our strategies during this situation. So let me just start. Maybe it's interesting.
Sorry, has Viola joined us, Romy?
Sorry?
Has Viola joined us?
Yes, she is.
Okay, fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hello Viola. We didn't hear you before. Okay, fine. So 2 from Berlin, fine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just a short overview about the timeline. We had the first coronavirus case in Germany on the 27th of January, and it was in the Bavarian part. And then it was spreading about Germany, or about the country. Berlin was preparing for the pandemic at the end of February, and the first huge reaction was to cancel the ITB Berlin, the International Tourism Fair, that had a deep impact for the economy here in the tourism sector. We had the first coronavirus case in Berlin on the 1st March. Click. After that, the public authority announced a lot of restrictions and rules, and the shops had to close on the 18th of March. Iris, could you please go back?
Yeah, am I to? Yes. All right, there you go.
Yes. The clubs and the bars were forced to close on the 17th of March, and a day later, all the shops had to close. Now we have the situation that our shops and stores and department stores are open again. And click. Yeah, on the 22nd of April, they were allowed to reopen, but only with a size of 800 square meters, and just only one person were allowed to jump in the shop.
By 20 square meters, one
Yes.
person.
Yes, and under attention of very strict hygienic rules. We were forced to wear a protective mask in public transport and the shops as well. Today we have approximately 170,000 coronavirus cases in Germany, and in Berlin more than 6,000. The museums and the hairdressers they're allowed to open since yesterday. Click. Yes, and now Viola will finish our short presentation.
Yes, a warm welcome from my status here. I'm in East Side Mall, which is a small shopping center in the east of Berlin, and I'm representing the board of the AG City, which is a member-based organization. And with this organization, our BIT started really last year. So we are really still in the beginning of all our items, which we will do the next 5 years. And therefore, our coronavirus infected, of course, our stores and the region, but not really the items in the BIT. Click. Yes, what we really did is a lot of communications for our members and for our BIT, our our BIT owners and landlords, and of course there was a lot of impact on economical bids. So we postponed, for example, our membership fees for 2020. We were cooperating with local radio stations to promote the regions and telling that they can still join at Kudamm in Berlin. And we were also helping them with, we have one item in this bid, which are city guides, which should help really the tourists to find the bus or find the toilet or find the warehouses and things like that. So they haven't that much to do at the moment because the city is nearly empty. But since the shops were allowed to open again, they were helping the shops in terms of hygienic things. And of course, a lot of things are not available to buy at the moment. So they were helping them to organize all these things they had to do with their shops to open. Click.
Okay.
So,
am I right, or did I go too fast? Here we are.
So, and we are allowed 1.5 weeks to open the stores. There was a lot of confusion all over Germany because they decided for Germany who can open and who can't, but then the countries themselves had to decide themselves what they do. So there was a lot of confusion around us. And we have a lot of international stores at Kudamm. And so they were relying on their landlords to really see what is allowed and whether they can open, whether they're bigger than 800 square meters, what can they do and how can they live with these regulations. And what we will see next week, hopefully, is that they will cancel these 800 square meters and they will open all stores except of their size. So that will help the situation coming back to normal life. Click. Yeah, what we do at the moment in this bid is really to use digital things like social media. The city guides help people to work with the hygiene regulations, and we are also starting our marketing strategy in our bid, which was one item which should be in the last years, but now we take it in the first years so that we can work really in terms of the development, and because we can't do so many things at the moment in that area.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Berlin, for the information. I have one question, which you can answer afterwards. Is, hello, what has Berlin BID done to assist understanding of protective measures and equipment? So what was your role in helping people understand what the measures and equipment should be? All right, this is something that we can answer with the Q&A. Thank you very much, Romy. Thank you very much, Viola. We're going to like to ask Giovanna Codato to share her thoughts and insights from Italy, and in particular from Ivrea, where you are in the north.
Right. Hello, everyone. Right. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm here from Ivrea. Ivrea is about halfway between Turin and Milano, closer to Torino than Milano, in the northwest part of Italy, which was one of the areas that were greatly impacted by the COVID epidemic. I am a former commissioner. I was for 10 years commissioner in my downtown, in my town administration for local planning, sustainability, environment, maintenance, public works, and private buildings. And I am an architect and planner that works on downtown revitalization programs and projects. In fact, the COVID stopped one of the projects that we were working on to revitalize a market square in a town nearby. So the current situation here, well, I don't know if you know, but the first case, formally communicated official case, was February 24th. Here in Iberia, we were in the middle of an orange throwing festival. We throw oranges to each other during Carnival, and that's when the first threat zones came out in Lombardy, where Milan is, in Veneto, where Venice is, just to give you an idea of the areas. After that, numbers started growing, so lockdown in the whole of Italy was on March 11th. And the foreseen reopening then was April 13th, then moved to yesterday. A gradual reopening, so it's a very light lift on lockdown. Further steps, if all goes well, if we don't have again a growth and an increase in positive people, then we will be having further reopening steps on May 18th and June 1st. In terms of how it's affected our town center, well, until yesterday, but more or less still like before that. Of course, we were all subject to social distancing and stay-at-home measures. Only one person per household could shop, mainly for groceries or sanitary necessities. At one point, the government realized we needed stationery for kids and also kids' clothes, because kids grow faster. And so actually bookshops reopened, pharmacies, hardware stores, food stores, and when it is allowed, because sanitary measures are respected, open air food markets, which are a major asset here in Italy, as in Spain. I would say that for downtown stores, they're at 10% their capacity. They're not all losing earnings. Actually, they're earning more, especially our local food shops, because people stay at home, don't eat out, don't go to restaurants, don't go to cafeterias, so they stay home. They all stay home. So you triple or even more the food that you need during the week, and you'd rather walk than drive to stores. So there are actually food shops that are really, really burdened work. Other effects, gender gap, it's abysmal increase here in Italy. Yesterday, some companies reopened, but 75% of workers are males. Kids are still at home from school, and this is not a topic. It's just not an issue here in Italy, because it's housewives and women workers that have to be the educators and the full-time housewives. And basically, you get to work at night. Even though smart work increased, and it's to say, they foresee that if 40% workers still smart work from now on, this would probably help us keep the curve down. And by the way, this produces improvement in productivity. I don't know if it's the same in other places. We had a huge impact on mobility. We had increases by at least 60% in some areas. In Rome, 57%. And in March,
we keep losing you. Can you repeat that? What happened with mobility?
Right. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, we had a decrease of traffic by 60% in some areas. In Rome, in respect to February, in March, we had 50% less cars, and in April, it was actually 77% less cars. What has grown in these months is trucks and commercial vehicles because of deliveries mainly. So this is the changes that we've been undergoing. There are some positive elements in terms of pollution decrease. Of course, it's destined to rise again once we all get on our cars, but we did have an average decrease of 20% of PM10 concentration. And of course, as it happens more or less all in urban areas, wildlife everywhere. How did our authorities react to the pandemic? Well, they tended to diminish prices at an early stage. This was followed by very little communication information, especially in smaller towns like mine, which is a half size. It's not too large and it's too little. Larger cities, I think, and smaller villages actually became a reference point for residents. All towns worked on solidarity reliefs, food and hygiene products, delivery to people that could not work, were not paid, with food coupons paid by the government. Sometimes distributing free masks, protecting over 65s with home delivery of basic goods. This was also very much sustained by nonprofit and local associations. For example, now they're trying to find computers for online classes and home deliveries, because this is an element that came out quite clearly. We have a digital gap, which is incredible. Some kids cannot take classes because they have smartphones, and they are credit smartphones, so they have credit contracts, so they can't spend too much money. So they could download the gigabytes for the files, and that seemed incredible to some of us, especially to some of us here, since we're on a Zoom conversation. But that is an issue. Now, in preparation for a further lockdown lift planned for May 18th, and we'll see if that's true, I think we'll go to a 6% capacity of stores. Towns are working on defining local tax reliefs for stallage, so for open air restaurants, waste tax reductions for retailers, bar, restaurants. And they're also focusing on local non-food retailers with new promotional measure like discount coupons. If you spend up to at least 50 euros in your town, this is happening there, get a 20% discount, and this will be paid for by the municipality. In terms of mobility, social distancing, of course, is applied now in buses and subways. This, even though cities like Milan are trying to increase bike lanes to moped use and green and sharing mobility with electric cars and e-bikes, there's going to be more cars around. That's going to be an issue. Another thing that's one of the changes, incredible changes that we're having, is e-money, electric money. This is a real cultural revolution for people in Italy. We've always been led to paying cash instead of debit or credit cards, and now we're using debit credit cards. That's a total cultural change that our government has been insisting on, that we'd never thought. And of course, now we're also witnessing a house market change, with people requiring balconies, terraces, gardens, trying to sell their old apartments because they were just thinking of their apartments as just a place to sleep in, not a place to live in. So that was a problem. And so now there's a whole interesting house market change. In terms of planning, what we are trying to work now here is phase 2 scenarios in terms of lockdown of compounds or blocks. More or less like civil safeguard projects. Like when you have earthquakes or floods, we have to understand how to lock down compounds or blocks or parts of the villages or neighborhoods. And we have to understand how to manage such lockdowns and plan such lockdowns in terms of closing bridges and streets. So that's one of the elements that I think is phase 2. So the gradual reopening scenarios, lockdowns, should be focusing on. This is more or less all I could say in a little bit more than 5 minutes. So I apologize.
Joanna, we'll come back to you because we had issues with your sound. So we're not sure if it's your network or if it's your microphone, right?
Let me turn it.
Mm-hmm. So we kept having interruptions. So people may come in back with questions on that. I already have several questions, all right? So please bear with us on that. We can try again afterwards when you're answering. Let's move on to the fourth introduction, the fourth panelist, Bill Addy from Liverpool. Bill, can you please introduce yourself in your double function today?
I can indeed, and thank you, and good afternoon, evening or morning, depending on where you are. It's a pleasure for me to be involved in this panel today. So my name, as I said, is Bill Addy. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Liverpool Bid Company, and we operate 2 bids in Liverpool city centre. That is the retail and leisure bid, which is covers majority of the, apart from Liverpool 1, which is a major shopping district in the city. It's the retail and leisure is the original retail district, so it covers 2 major shopping centres and the key high street shops like Marks and Spencer's and Next and River Island, Primark and Lush, which are well-known UK names and indeed European names and worldwide names. And then also we have the commercial district bid, which is the heart of the business district in the city, which again has about 60,000 employees that work in those districts in key public sector organisations like the Immigration Office, Home Office, courts, tax office, but also major professional services, accountants, lawyers, and the service industry around that with restaurants and hotels. Our income across both bids is about £1.5 million per annum. I'm also the chairman of the Bid Foundation, which is a special interest group established within IPM. And that Bid Foundation represents bids across the UK. And through that role also, and Simon Quinn will talk about that, I co-chair one of the sector groups within the High Street Task Force. So quite active in the place world here in the UK. But
Bill, before you go, Bill, excuse me. Bill, before you go on, just remind attendees they can ask the questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the black frame. Thank you, and sorry for interrupting.
No problem at all. And I'm happy to answer questions if any come up for me, or we'll pick them up later. But just to say, so Liverpool Bid, our job is about footfall, about tourism, just set into context. Liverpool is a city that is reborn in recent years following the European Capital Culture achievement in 2008. The visitor economy in the Liverpool City region is £4.9 billion sterling. About 55,000 jobs are through the visitor economy alone. That's in our hotels and restaurants, our conference centres. And so you can imagine the devastation that is the impact of COVID-19 on our city at this moment in time. Because UK was a little bit different than the rest of Europe and the world, but and so we came into COVID quite slowly. I remember skiing in France in January and hearing about this COVID, and there was news that somebody had been through Geneva Airport at the same time that I and my family had been through, and we were quite concerned about it. But COVID really hit us in March of this year, and in fact, we went into a position in mid-March, and in fact it was March the 16th, when our Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that it would be advisable, if you could work from home, to work from home. And also it would be advisable to not go into pubs, restaurants and shops if you could avoid that. That was on March the 16th. Clearly he moved from that position to March the 23rd, advising a total lockdown. And we see that measured in our city centre, with footfall moving from and being measured in hundreds of thousands per day to tens of thousands. And the latest footfall statistics that came through just this morning show that we are year on year 87.7% on footfall. So this magic 80 number seems to be, we're hitting the same areas. The same for traffic. So that the only footfall in our city centre is, at this moment, are some residents that live within the centre shopping in only one of our major department stores, Marks and Spencer's, which is still operating. But the rest of our shops, Liverpool One and all of its shops, Liverpool One was a £1 billion investment only 10, 15 years ago. It's closed completely. So you can see that impact that is having on our city at this moment in time. As I say, that's something that is reflected right across the UK at this moment in time. And we're still in this position of lockdown is still in place. We understand in the UK, and here in UK, we split into devolved areas with Wales, Scotland and England operated slightly different. So the English lockdown and moves away from COVID, we understand that our Prime Minister is going to make an announcement on Sunday about what that roadmap will look like. The roadmap for how different sectors of the economy will open up. Because here in the UK, we have seen a shift from the private sector leading the way and the state retracting to the state now coming into being the responsible organisation that is including the business support measures that have come into place. So we know that first and foremost, this is a public health issue, and I'm not really going to talk about the public health, although I would say that the majority of people in the UK, you will see from the stats, have followed the message to stay at home, to stay safe and to protect the NHS, and we've seen that working. The figures are dropping in terms of death through COVID here in the UK, but just to pick up on some of the support measures the government have carried out in the UK, a quite unprecedented ability of, it's called a job retention scheme, whereby companies can put their staff on furlough, which is a change in contract, and then the government, through the tax system, is paying the workers' wages, and that's in place until the end of June. We're arguing now at the moment that should be extended for those various elements of the economy that will not be able to move out of that lockdown. So that's part of the work that's clearly part of the business support. There's also loan schemes, and a particular impact in the city of Liverpool was the grant scheme that was announced and has been rolled out, and in fact is being very effective. So any business that received small business rate relief, which in the UK was a business with rateable value below 15,000, they received a grant of £10,000. And any business in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector received a grant with a rateable value to 51,000 sterling, received a grant of £25,000. So UK government spent £12.5 billion sterling in providing grants to small businesses. And that was paid out through local authorities, and the majority of that money has now gone to those companies. So that was about reassurance for the companies, but now we're thinking about recovery. And the bid is working at the center of that, providing reassurance for business. You know, our job is about animation and footfall, but actually we also fund to police officers, and those police officers have stayed working in the center of Liverpool, providing contact between businesses that are open, businesses that are closed, and providing reassurance, and they continue to do that. And we are now working on an operational plan to see how we can open the various sectors of industry up. And that's, I know that's reflected right across the UK, because we don't yet know the timetable, but what we do know that timetable will only allow businesses to open with some form of social distancing in place. And what that will mean for the visitor economy, we're only just beginning to really understand. I had a meeting this morning with our hospitality association, restaurants and hotels, and some of the information is filtering out from government as to how those businesses will open and what that will look like. And it will look a completely different landscape for quite some time to come. So clearly, the BID's role at the center of that is about providing that resource for providing support to business, providing reassurance for business, and then looking to see how we can operate our normal events, our normal festivals in a socially distanced, protected way. And that's going to test us and lots of the BIDs. And indeed, we meet, the BID Foundation meets on a weekly basis with a webinar that will be looking at that over the coming weeks. So very much UK at this moment is closed. We're thankful, I suppose, that deaths were as low as, well, it's 30,000 deaths. Something you say you're thankful for, it was only that low, but we obviously deal with every one of those deaths with sadness, but we look to how we recover in the future, and BIDs are very much at the center of that. I just mentioned in closing that the UK government have also supported business improvement districts in England by providing a grant of £6 million to cover running costs for each BID for 3 months. We know that our levy bills, when they go out, will not be paid, and we believe we will not see the same level of income for the foreseeable future. So we're having to work how we will deliver those services in a different way, in a different landscape, but with the reassurance that we are connecting business together to bring our cities back to life as soon as we can. So that's a sort of an overview from Liverpool and from the UK.
Thanks very much, Bill, for all this overview. So thanks, everybody. Keep your questions coming. Please use a Q&A function, not the chat function. It makes it difficult to follow both windows at the same time. Let me see what questions we have, and I'll start at the beginning, and that was a question to Michael Edwards, which is whether when the BID was established, when Chicago Loop was established, whether there was a crisis management tool put together from the beginning.
Well, I'm embarrassed to say no. We talked about it for 3 years, putting a crisis communication plan together within the organization. We actually budgeted for it this year, but we did not have a crisis communication plan. But I think it wasn't so bad because everybody was in it together, and everybody, other businesses, our members, were all trying to figure out how they're going to operate remotely. So to some extent, it was, you know, misery loves company, and it wasn't a big deal, but certainly speaks to why we should have one in place.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me now try to collect questions for the panelists so we can go through. There is a question, there's several questions for Berlin. Some of them are very practical. For example, whether, let's see, whether roads were closed in the center of Berlin. Did you have any road closures, Viola?
No, not that I know of.
No. I wouldn't think that either. And then both of you talked about 50% of SMEs risking to close down, right?
Yes.
Who calculated that, and do you know how it was calculated?
I think it's more a feeling of the discussions we have with these retailers, and how we see that they struggle at the moment. And so it's a guess. It's not more than a guess, really.
Okay. And what do you have similar data from large businesses? Do you have the risk of closures in large businesses too?
I don't think so, really. We will see the 1 or 2 or some more, let's say a handful, but these bigger ones would have had trouble beforehand, I would say. So it's not the COVID which kills them, in brackets. it's their system beforehand already.
Okay, all right. Another question that I will try to answer is the Robert Koch Institute. That's the institute that calculates the whole pandemic in Germany, estimated that R values grew again a few days after shops reopened. Do you think this had an effect on visitor confidence at all? This was wrong information. This is wrong information from the Financial Times that spread it around the world. We did not have a rise of R values in Germany after the opening. We had a tiny rise 5 days after the opening, which had nothing to do with it because you cannot calculate it 5 days later. You calculate it 14 days later, which was minimal. So it went from 0.9 to 0.96, which was announced as 1. And after that, the full last week, it moved between 0.75 to 0.85. So in general, we've had a decrease. But we're only going to have new R values in Germany today or tomorrow. And that then we will know exactly what happened the last 2 weeks when the shops opened. We haven't had them there yet. And that's why the government has not met to discuss new measures. Right, so that's just to answer that. A question for Italy. And the question from Giovanna, Giovanna, try if you can use the built-in microphone and not the extension. Maybe it works better. We can try it out.
Right.
The question to you was, is there any plan to reopen markets, both indoor and outdoor markets?
Yes. Do you hear me now?
Much better, actually.
Okay. Yes. Some already reopened. There are some, the reopening depends on regulations. If you follow, if you have personnel able to have people respect distances and count, the people at the different market areas. So yes, many reopened already last week. It really depended on towns which are responsible for open markets usually, or management companies like the ones in Florence. They had to guarantee that they were able to enforce the social distancing measures.
Mm-hmm. I see here in a site that I'm following in Gambero Rosso that they were saying that the Porta Palazzo in Torino, the huge market, is actually opening up completely. Do you know anything about how they're moving in that?
Yeah, basically, they sort of gate the market so they can make sure they can control how many people go into it. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's been a long discussion in Italy on protecting masks and their usefulness. But now, for example, in Torino, because of the regional government's decision, masks are mandatory. So you have to have your mask. You have people, actually, I think it's local police officers, the municipal police officers that control a number of people that could go in at the same time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's in full reopening. The right. Food part though, only the food. Mm-hmm. Right. All clothing is closed.
Okay. All right. Fine. All right. Thank you. I have a question for Bill, and that is, Bill, as you know, generally, how do you evaluate the UK government support package for bids? What are your thoughts on that?
The package for bids, well, I was quoted on the UK government website, and I said I welcomed the partial response. Clearly, it's an initial response, but there's 256 bids. Is that right? In England, anyway, of that magnitude. Apologies if I've missed one. And that's £6.1 million. So potentially, I don't know, we're still waiting to hear what it will mean, but it will be tens of thousands of pounds per bid, which is good and welcome. But for bids to be at the centre of recovery, they need to be funded clearly through this current period. And for instance, the retail and leisure bid, and I'll talk about Liverpool, our retail and leisure bid has an income of about 800,000. We've calculated that all of the retail, hospitality and leisure businesses who both received grants and also will not pay any business rates this year, if they did not pay their bid levy as well, we'd end up with about, I think it was about 15% of income in that particular bid, which would not allow us to do anything. So we say thanks to government, but this is for the long term, and we need to continue and review it. So it's not just a one-off. It's good, but we need to keep reviewing. And I think I would, in saying that, I echo the thoughts of many of the bid managers across the UK.
All right, thank you very much, Bill. I have a combined question for Berlin again, which is after shops reopened, what was the footfall? Do you have any calculations of how much the recovery was? And also for Berlin, are you planning any events now to attract people back into the city?
From the first question, it's again just a guess. I would say that from before closing the Kudam town scene to now, we're back with 10 to 15%.
Only 10 to 15% of pre-epidemic. Okay.
Yeah, but that's a guess because we can't measure it really at the moment. This is one of our pieces in our bid, but we're not there at the moment, so we can't.
You still haven't got a footfall counting mechanism in place, right?
Because brokers are doing it at the moment, and they are in home office and can't count the people. So it's again just a feeling. Your second question was,
are you planning any events to bring people back into the city?
No, we at the moment we are not really allowed to do some sales activities to bring the people into the city center, due to the fact we have an agreement with the trade association, because it's we have the hygienic to attempt the hygienic rules, and we are not allowed to bring so many people into the city center. So we are not allowed to do events at the moment.
But one of our very important events in that region is the Christmas market. As lots of you might know, that Christmas markets in Germany are generally very popular. And this is the next event we're actually discussing whether this could happen this year in Berlin or not.
So you could even cancel Christmas market. Oh God. Okay.
We're at least discussing it. So.
Okay, fine. Not good. I have some questions for everybody, and I'll come back to individual questions. Something very interesting. You know, cities around the world have been reacting to this. Do any of you have any best practices? So any kind of things you've heard that cities are doing, where you would say that was a very good idea, we could learn from that and do it? Is there anything, anybody on the panel?
In Chicago, we have, kind of thankfully, we have a new mayor. Lori Lightfoot came in May. She surrounded herself with some very good people who were still feeling their way, if you will, in terms of how they put the city together. And they were committed to being much more transparent than the past administration. And so this, the COVID issue has resulted in these terrific partnerships that they're forming, and they're really reaching out for others. And so we have people, civic organizations like ours, the hotel industry, the restaurant association, and others have had great communications with the mayor's office. And they are very, they have a good platform, a well-scripted way for people to communicate. They ask questions, they take feedback, they bring feedback to the next meeting. And initially the discussion was all about what are we going to do? What should we be doing? What kind of economic relief can we give to businesses, not enforcing permits, not enforcing parking, loading zones, you know, some of those kinds of things. But now they're talking about recovery, and they're including us and others in that discussion.
But
very good.
But have you been aware of, you know, best reactions around the world where you would say somebody else has done something?
Sure.
Good,
So
you think
like closed down our lakefront because it was so popular. It's 26 miles. And what we learned from Seattle is that they reopened their parks, but you can't stop moving. You can be in the park, but you can't stop moving. And I thought that that was a pretty innovative way to allow people to both be in the park, but not to congregate and gather.
All right. Okay. Anybody else who has any best practices from around the world, something you've heard that you think was interesting?
In terms of events, what
No,
is
and in general, in terms of reactions to the pandemic.
But from my point of view, in terms of events, which was interesting for me to see, is that car cinemas came back.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
even with a club situation or a disco situation, that everybody sits in the car and listens to a band or has
The good old drive-in, right? The good old drive-in.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
this was, for me, quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. Do the others have something? No? Oh, Bill, was that a hand? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a hand. I was just picking up Michael's point about communications. I think what we're learning from this and best practice is about how we communicate with people. That actually we're getting out of our silos, because for too long cities have operated in silos with everybody being very defensive and very protective.
Yes.
The fact that we're communicating today right across the world shows this is a worldwide pandemic that has impacted on every country. And we're shaping our response to it in very similar ways, although there's different contexts. But I think communications is at the heart of this. And one thing we need to ensure is that when we move back to a world which will be some form of normality when we get into it, that we retain this ability to communicate with others. So daily calls, weekly calls, monthly calls, we can do far more by communicating like this, but with what it will change for us is how we use transport, because no longer will we need to gravitate to London for meetings. We'll do it like this. And I think certainly for my generation, the use of this type of communications will change the way we operate. But of course, what it will also, we were rethinking high streets in the UK and about how you make high streets right at the centre of communities, how you change retail, so where you are experiential in retail, then you will be successful. And of course, that requires connectivity. So what we need to do is now how we move into that next phase. But I think communications, clear communications and timely communications have been very important. And we've seen great examples of that right across the BID movement. I know that in the UK as well. So for me, that's good. Clearly, all the other initiatives are things that we're looking towards them, because we can't do very much when we're all locked and working from home. Apart from the great quizzes and drinks evenings and parties that we've all had. I know Manchester had an excellent example where they've been live streaming from certain DJs right across Manchester, raised over £250,000 in 3 weeks. So a great example of how that operates. So it's taking the nightclub into people's houses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have a couple of questions that have to do a bit with recovery and crisis, which I would like to leave for after Simon's presentation. But I still have one question that goes to all those who work in bids, and is how much, so that goes for Chicago and Liverpool and Berlin, which is how much of a budget cut are you expecting to suffer? Because based on either non-payment of businesses or businesses closing down. Have you got an estimate on that?
Well, in Chicago, we are provided $3 million a year in bid assessments, and we get paid half a year at a time. So through March, we received half of that. There is a question, I can't hardly believe it because nobody ever gets out of paying their property taxes, but there is a question of whether we'll get the second half, $1.5 million, which is typically comes in August. It's a second half payment. So we're a little nervous about that. We think it'll probably come late. We have a line of credit in place for that. For 2021, however, ours is based upon assessed value, and we're expecting a 30% drop in assessed value.
Ooh.
So for 2021, or it might actually hit in 2022, it sort of depends. We are anticipating a big cut. On the membership side, we generate about $500,000, and we have delayed our membership. And this is actually, this may be somewhat controversial. We have heard that it's not a good idea to not ask your members to continue to pay. You can certainly ask them to pledge or to delay, but if you simply don't, if you say to them, you don't have to pay us this year, you devalue your organization. This is what some people are saying. So we're intending to send out our second quarter invoices 30 or 60 days late, but we are going to send them out, and we will do third and fourth quarter too.
Right. Okay. Bill, have you got any figures and what you think you're going to have as a budget cut?
Yes, I mean, on the point of levy bills, we are advising from the centre, from the Bid Foundation, that all bids should send out their levy bills in full when levy bills are due. And depending on the cycle of bids, levy bills are sent out. A lot of them are sent out during April. We know that already they are showing significant reduction in what you would anticipate receiving. Our own bills are sent out in June. We will be billing about £1.4 million, and then we get another about £150,000 through additional work where we use the public space in the city for promotional activities. We don't anticipate that we will get very much income at all through that element of it, but for our bid levies, somebody said to me last week, it's a bit like pinning the tail on a donkey. Do you know that game where you put your blindfold on and you try and think where the center is? We don't know, but we are so planning for the worst and hoping for the best. I know from some of my colleagues in other bids, they're seeing significant reductions. I would anticipate that we would work on a 50% income for the next year, but I don't know. But we have to do that.
All right, so Michael talks about a reduction of 1/3. You're talking about even 50%, right?
I could possibly see that coming. And of course, just picking up on the Christmas point, Christmas planning, which is where we spend a lot of our money, although Christmas will come, as we say, on December the 25th, it will be completely different in the UK this year from, and that's a concern for us, how we respond to that. But I think we need to accept that and acknowledge it and deal with it when it comes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Viola and Romy, have you got any idea of what may happen in Berlin? Any reduction in your budget?
We do not have estimated costs yet, and we do not figure it out, but maybe 15 or 20%. We got a special clause in our contracts that if we did not get the money from the public authority, we are able to quit. So there is no risk for the bid. It would be not good to cancel some measures, but yeah, we don't know yet at the moment.
Oh, okay, fine. So I will keep the other questions for after Simon's presentation, if that's all right. I still have a very interesting question. In particular, there's one I'd like all to think about, is what is happening in, so the 2 or 3 questions that come to that. What is happening to public space? Because we're talking about the necessity for social distancing, but especially in old towns where, you know, pavements are very narrow, streets are narrow, there is no distance to distance people. So what do you do? And are there any thoughts about that? Or in the case of Berlin, are you doing something to, you know, give people also the sense that Berlin is a safe place to be? And Kudam would be a safe place to be. But we can answer them afterwards, just throwing them so that you can think about it while Simon's speaking. Simon will present the framework, and then we can continue with the questions. So please go on sending your questions through Q&A. Please don't use the chat for that. It's impossible for me to follow both windows. Thank you. The Q&A function. Simon, could you please introduce yourself to the ones who don't know you and what you're going to do for us?
Thanks, Eris. I'm Simon Quinn. I'm co-chair of the Institute of Place Management. I'm also a professorial fellow in place management practice at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm the executive director of England's High Street Task Force, which is an initiative set up by government about a year ago to support the regeneration of our town centres over a 5-year period. So I've worked in town centres for about 30 years, at times as a town centre manager, an economic development consultant, heading up the Association of Town and City Management, where I met some of our fellow panelists, and setting up the Institute in first stage along with Kathy Parker. The Institute exists to serve place managers primarily, to develop the concept, to provide support where necessary. And when the COVID crisis loomed on the horizon, we sat and thought about what are the issues that place managers might need to do in order to help the places they serve through this. So I want to share my screen and show you the COVID framework that we developed. Oh, hang on, let's do it here. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah.
So this was looking at the stages of what we thought we would go through with the pandemic. And we obviously started with the crisis because that was the experience that people were feeling. And the way we started thinking about this initially was how a place manager would be put in a position to provide services. We realized that lots of things couldn't happen. They no longer were putting on festivals, driving footfall, doing anything else of that kind. But we felt that there were things that they could do to continue to serve.
Simon, I can't see your screen. I don't know if anybody else can, but I can.
Oh, sorry, that's what I was asking.
All right.
Hang on. Let me try again.
Yes. Huh.
Does that work?
Ah, there you go.
Yes.
Yes.
Now we do.
Sorry.
That's okay.
There we go. I must sorry, this was the recovery framework. 4 elements, and they're on a time period going from crisis through pre-recovery, recovery, transformation. And our thinking for this, say, was to really provide support, ideas for what place managers should be doing during each of these stages. We based it initially on looking at risk management and disaster reduction frameworks, drawing in some of the learning that had been going on about that in order to think about how factors were introduced, how factors were relevant. And it was drawn up by the research team at IPM initially. But then we wanted to disseminate it. We started talking to the place managers in the UK and elsewhere and asking them what some of the issues were they were facing. So the different items that have appeared in here came in a large part directly from feedback from the ground, from the issues that were being faced by place managers. So obviously we started in crisis where everyone was, and we wanted to look at how some of the issues in a town centre at this point, remembering how complex, how contested they are, the multitude of actors who is involved in a town centre or any other place, but particularly town centres, and thinking about where would a place manager be most helpful. So some of this was about answering questions. Lots of the businesses, lots of the people in that town might have been hearing about government announcements, but they weren't quite sure how to get hold of it. And yes, in some countries, local authorities are structured so they may go there, but in the UK, that was not apparently clear. So we used some of the place management partnerships to answer questions. As the national organisation working with the task force, we were gaining lots of data on what was happening to things like footfall, sales, other bits of information about what was going on. And we were able to provide that data back to the place manager, who could then disseminate it out to the people that they worked with. So this was doing 2 things. 1, it was giving an actual picture of what was going on. And 2, it was providing some reassurance that what was happening in their town or their place was not unique. That reassurance we were also asking people on the ground to do. And so, as Bill was mentioning earlier, BIDs were able to keep security in place to look after vacant towns and places. Liverpool also produced a video to explain that they were doing this and share to people that this was the role that was going on. Whilst your town centre or place was empty, things were happening. But key amongst this was also finding ways to signpost people to resources and help, but also thinking about the structures that we had, because we think many places are very vulnerable. The place management group that exists may not be very large. It may have limited resources, and as you've already heard, many BIDs were under threat about their funding not going forward. So we were very interested in this whole process of how did you start to think about structures even during this crisis? And what we've seen by using this process is lots of new networks created in terms of thinking about structures that can communicate with one another, help one another to solve problems, and then at the same time help the wider community. So some of those things have been about working with retailers to help them get online so they can continue to trade to some extent, and then making sure that the community was aware of that. And all through this stage in crisis, we as the Institute have been taking information from the ground, either through surveys we've asked place partnerships to do, or directly from experience through webinars and providing information back to government. Now, in many cases, in a local case, that might be providing information to local government, but it's still important to use your knowledge and your skills and your contacts at a place manager level to feed up to there. So the crisis lasts as long as it lasts, but that doesn't mean that we move instantly from crisis to recovery. We think there's a lot in the pre-recovery stage, which is really planning for recovery. And very much here is this network and capacity building. As I say, we are concerned about whether there will be enough focus on places as we come into this pre-recovery period. Many local authorities have had to divert services to healthcare, to thinking about things like education, to offering other forms of support that will be necessary. So we are looking at place management being able to develop the leadership, the local capacity, the networking in order to take things forward. And that means making a recovery plan. It means starting to bring the parties together to say who will deal with things like social distancing as we reopen the place. Can we think about methods of communication? Can we do things better? How can we use online much more in order to communicate and to help things go forward? And how do we prioritize and begin to think about the kind of place we want our place to be as we move forward? So the pre-recovery we're going to be looking at. Now, each of these sessions, what we've been doing as IPM is running hour-long webinars on them. We've done 2 so far. If you've not been able to see them, you can watch them online. We've saved them and recorded them. But this coming Thursday afternoon, we'll be doing the pre-recovery webinar where we have speakers from outside who give their experience of what they're doing on this, as well as more guidance on each of these things. So obviously we move on then to recovery. Now, I think most places are not yet reaching this stage, but when we do, we start to think other things are important. It is still about the whole working together. We're concerned about quick reactions, though we're hearing so far and just seeing that actually this reopening is not, in many cases, causing the epidemic to come back. What is also quite interesting from the data that Google have on mobility is that nor are the crowds of people coming back into our town centres yet. So a lot more reassurance may be needed in some places to drive footfall, and it's quick responses that we can bring forward. Obviously, data tells us a lot. Data will be very important in monitoring and seeing whether routeways into town should be changed, transport might change, opening hours might change, all kinds of things to reflect and make the experience once again a coherent one. Alongside all of this, there's lots of information that we need to get going to understand the intentions of businesses whether they're going to be able to continue to trade, whether the landlords are going to be in a state to repair places and offer management services. So there's a lot of thinking that will go on in recovery as we adapt. And then the telling the story is really making sure that we link people back to their place again, that they feel connected to it, because having been away from it in many instances, perhaps they're leaving it. So we'll be thinking about experiences and that kind of stuff. There's more to go in this recovery chart as we get closer into it and begin to experience it. But that's not the end of the matter. I think we've always been concerned that maybe getting back to normal is what everyone desires, but we don't think that's the way forward. We think now is the time, with all this change, with all this adaptation that's going on, to think about transformation. We already knew that many town centres around the world were under stress, but we also know we've got the great challenges of climate change, decarbonisation, economic inequality, questions of social justice, homelessness, and all these other kinds of things. So how do we rethink our places? How do we make them better to serve the community? And one of the things that's been happening during the COVID crisis is this great development of community engagement and activity, people volunteering to do things, people networking together, people being innovative in how they're working together. How can we make sure that continues to exist? How do we make sure that people, having found the use of their local centres, continue to make use of that? What will be the great challenges for cities as we go into transformation, with perhaps many fewer people working in offices on a regular day? So part of this is rethinking your city. And Milan, I was very impressed by when they said they had these visions for 2020 about creating new spaces and new walkability, new livability in their city. And they were going to now be able to deliver many of these in 2020 by closing spaces, and many other cities are following on this. So we think you should be thinking about the future of your city in a completely different way and saying, how do we not go back to normal, because the normal may well not exist, many businesses will not open, but how do we plan our cities, our places for the future? So that is the challenge of transformation. So all of this is available from our website, the IPM website. We have also been developing this whole framework so that individual places can take a downloadable version of it and adapt it. We're not saying there's only one way of doing this. There's not only one priority in places. Different kinds of places will have different kinds of priorities. But what we are saying is, you as a place management partner, you as a place management group can adapt this and use it. And many of the bids in the UK, and as you heard earlier in Chicago Loop, are adapting this and making use of it for their own purposes. It's intended as a framework to be adaptable, to perhaps act as a checklist, see if you're doing the right kinds of things. But it's a useful way we've found to engage wider parties in it. And in many of the cities, though this has been initially led by bids in the UK, local authorities, community groups, others are signing up to this whole process. So as I said, you can either see the webinars we've already run, you can join us for the future webinars, you can look at our websites and get the information. And we'll distribute detail of where the adaptable version, the downloadable version is to you after this. So I'm happy to take questions. I'll stop there, Iris.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thanks for this. Fascinating stuff. I have two questions for you, Simon. They actually came in earlier, but they go very well with what you were saying. One is for Heather, from Heather, who actually had to leave us. And she had a very good question. She was asking, do you think that we should expand our framework to include a pre-crisis stage to help us think about disaster emergency planning in advance of being hit by such events? And that links in very well with another question that I'm just going down to find it, which was, sorry, I have to scroll down. It's disappeared anyway, but the question was, should we think of some kind of a permanent crisis and emergency plan. So have a permanent contingency plan because crises are going to hit us again, and maybe even following waves of the same crisis, of the COVID crisis, may hit us, right? So it's about, the question we asked Michael originally, was there a plan for that at the beginning? Now is, should we build that in the framework, and also should we build a pre-crisis step?
That absolutely seems sensible. I mean, obviously in the UK and many other countries, local authorities will have emergency planning officers, but they were never really thinking about the scale of this. And I think that's the thing that took us all by surprise, both its scale and its rapidity. And yes, we definitely could have been better prepared. It's interesting, I was reading about Tesco, a major retailer in the UK and elsewhere, and they said they were in many ways quite prepared for what happened, because 2 years ago, they'd imagined if someone bombed their head office and they all had to then work from home. So many of their systems had been set up based upon that, and they were immediately able to switch to that plan and start working. And that is not the case in many of our towns and cities and other places.
Mm-hmm. So what about a permanent, a perpetual resilience plan for responding, recovering, reinventing?
You can imagine that a lot of places will look to do this. I mean, it will always have to be in the background now, again, because of the rapidity of what has happened. I mean, we'll probably get more aware at looking at early warnings and responding. There's growing evidence that many people knew about COVID at an earlier stage, but didn't think it would affect them. It wouldn't come this fast. Oh, it's something happening in China. And, all of that will go now, I think.
All right. One more question for you, Simon. In this reimagine, reinventing, rethink phase, which sort of ideal visitor or traveler will you want to attract back?
Oh, now that's a good question. I mean, I'm still extremely worried about the fact that once we start meeting again, we may well see a reoccurrence of this. I think there's a real nervousness, and I was looking at some data of where a survey has been done with tourist business in the English Midlands. They're concerned about foreigners coming in. They're concerned about this spreading into country areas and things of the problem. So I no matter what I might say, oh yes, we'd like to get back to having international visitors. We'd like to stop, ensuring we can all go back on holiday again. I think we're going to see a very slow recuperation of that. And first and foremost, you should be thinking of your place serving your local community, because they are the ones who are more available. And then I think we get a bit more confident and we go forward. Mm-hmm. Trying to force people to, once people start traveling, it's still going to upset and alienate a lot of the people who do not want to see long distance commuters coming in or whatever.
All right. Michael has something to say, but I'll come back with another question to you, Simon.
Okay.
Just wanted to reiterate that point. Here in Chicago, the local tourism industry is huge. Our hotels are suffering. It's $55 million a year, 55 million visitors a year, a lot of it in the Loop, a lot of it in the Chicago Loop. And the partnership groups that are getting together talking about recovery, sort of targeting the end of June as sort of when we're going to kind of be back to some semblance of normal, is really to start with what they're calling friends and family. And it's really just the local folks. That's all we're going to market to. Once they're getting a little bit more comfortable, then it'll be concentric circles out. So right on point with Simon.
Mm-hmm. And Simon, have you got any kind of an idea of a timeline for these things based on the knowledge we have today?
Not really. And obviously you're aware that certain countries are ahead of others in terms of going out of lockdown now. I think we're going to learn so much from that experience. I know that in Asia, that with very strict monitoring and controls, they've got themselves out and seem to be moving forward. But it'd be interesting to see what starts happening in European cities and whether there is any setback. That might delay everything else. But I think in this country, there is a lot of planning going on now in order to how we start coming out of it. I still have this worry, as I say, about social distancing, particularly in crowded places. I mean, how on earth we all travel on trains, we come in and out on, lots of buses arriving at once. I do not know until we have ways of monitoring this with technology as well.
All right. Let me pass this. This was very good. Bill, were you planning to say something, Bill? Sorry.
I was just really picking up on the point about easing down of lockdown in the UK. UK now today has, I don't know if you've seen the recent stats, but the UK has got the highest death toll of any of the European countries. That will very much colour how our governments are, when already they're considering lockdown. They want to open up the doors very quickly, but as only if the parameters are safe. So it's very much, it's going to be very slow and very long. And the way that we used to jump up from our regional airport here in Liverpool across to Europe for a weekend, 2 hours from Liverpool to any European city, that is not going to be back in place for quite some time. Liverpool is a city built, and one of the key drivers at the moment is footfall and tourism. We were the city that the Beatles came from, and Beatles tourism is very important, and people come from all over the world for that. That won't be coming back soon. A particular angst in the city is the fact that professional football, Premier League soccer, is suspended at the moment and may not come back in its normal form for quite some time. So for the foreseeable future, we will be looking at people coming into our city, just local people, perhaps an hour's drive time. I wouldn't even think more than that, and just coming in to see and experience the city, but in a healthy way. Cities will need to provide reassurance, safety and security, and that reassurance is the health message that particularly picked up earlier, Michael, I would say. Liverpool is something we're looking at as a healthy city, because that's what we need to be focusing on now. And the whole, the paradigm that the situation normal that was in the past is gone, and we move into a new normality that none of us really know what it will look like.
All right. Let's talk about that new normality. And since Giovanna is a planner, I would be very much interested in your ideas, Giovanna, about what type of restructuring we may need in public spaces. And I'm using public space here in a very generic term. So it could be your parks, it could be your streets, it could be the way we're controlling the market in Turin, it could be all types of public infrastructure, it could be public transportation, all these places where people meet. Any thoughts on that?
Right. Well, I don't know if you knew, but a couple of years ago we had a major incident in downtown Torino. There was a Juventus, I don't remember the British team, but there was a match, could have been Manchester, but I'm not sure. I think it was a Champions League, but I don't know anything about soccer, or football as you call it, so I apologize. Anyway, all the Juventus club fans were in a square, and panic broke, and a lot of people got injured and died, and a few died also. I think it was 2017 maybe, or 16. So after that, what happened is that we started regulating public spaces as if they were cinemas or closed spaces, which wasn't accepted very much, because basically they're asking you now by Italian regulations to lock down spaces, then define exit routes as if they were really closed, gated, but they're not, in fact, because maybe you're in an open square. So basically we have the green exit signs in an open square now to define fluxes and safety exit pathways, as if it was in a theater. So this was ridiculed, and but now basically we're going back to that. The same measure that we're having, gate the areas and then decide fluxes and then decide what goes in, the flux in and the flux out. Basically, now Italians are doing the same thing for train stations, for example. Yesterday we had this partial lockdown lift. We have entrance and exit corridors. We're having that in markets. We'll have it in squares, of course. So basically, at least what I'm seeing as a planner now here on this managing this phase 2, we're going to regulate spaces physically. Right now,
signage and things like that.
Yeah, there's already signage. There's signage on sidewalks, for example, when you are in a line. Italians are not very good at queuing. So now we have big red dots on the pavement that says where you have to stop to be in a line for bread or stuff, and we're strangely enough respecting this. So we're going to have to work on signage. They have put signage now on the subways where you can actually stay or stand. You can sit or stand on a subway or on a bus. So yeah, we're working a lot with signage. And that's going to be an element. And on locking down gating areas and identifying fluxes in and out. That's going to be a major for squares.
Thank you. Viola and Romy, some years ago, there was a terrorist attack on the Berlin Christmas market, right? And after that, there were certain measures that were taken, safety measures, and so on. Do you have any plans, or are there any ideas on how the Berlin bid, Kudam Town scene is? I mean, a lot of your plans have to do with redesigning public space, right? We're all thinking about public space. Do you think that now we'll have to rethink all these plans in this case to change that infrastructure? We were thinking about all these kiosks in the middle where people could eat and so on, and now they're telling us, no, you have to distance yourself from each other. Will that change our plans? What do you think?
It's really a different question, and it's very different to find an answer so early, I must admit. I think whatever you do, of course, we had this terror attack at the Breitscheidplatz, and it's still defended at the moment, this square. And maybe next time it's something like COVID-19, which attacks us, and the next time it will be whatever, an airplane which crashes down. I think you can't have plans for all things which might happen at times. And what my personal thought is that people will come to a normality again, maybe, let's say, in half a year. And I don't know whether then they think of wearing a mask or disinfecting their hands. My guess is that people really come to normal life, which it was before. So.
Asking because a couple of questions about that, about how we regulate queuing and so on. One of the things that I saw in the farmers market in Berlin, in Kolwitzplatz the other day, was that in front of the stalls you had lines on the ground showing you exactly where the next person should be. And actually, this didn't even go through the market, but it went almost behind the stall, so it would keep people out of the market. So there was a very, very clear demarcation on the ground in the open market on exactly where people should stand. There were people coming in and they were controlling that. Could you imagine such a thing in a big retail street, such as Tauentzien, in front of shops?
Not really. I think you see it already in shopping centers, of course, because then it's a closed situation. But Tauentzien Kudam is not closable from my point of view. So maybe you will find something that you have it at the moment, that you queue outside 1.5 meters after each other for a while, but I don't think this will come to public spaces.
Yeah, I see. What about Chicago? Have you got any measures to restructure and change public space?
Well, I think one thing I just wanted to add is I think that there will be some citizen self-regulation. So I think people will want to be in public space, but I think we'll all be somewhat afraid of being too close to others. So I think public space management can provide the suggestion of where you could stand, or that this is 6 feet away from that location over there. I think we should kind of capture that and work with that kind of attitude. I also think that public space management for us has been put an event on, manage the event, we're kind of done, move on. We have some small public spaces that we set tables and chairs out, and then we manage them, but not really. So what I would say is that I think we're going to be managing those spaces much more intently. And this may be a new service that business improvement districts can provide to their community by, gating a small public space. You have movable tables and chairs, but your street teams, your clean teams have to be in there every half an hour to wipe down the tables, to reset everything so that people can feel comfortable using them in a way that is limited, but still they're kind of doing their own thing. They're putting the table just where they want it. You're not forcing them to sit in a particular place. So I think we need to understand the customer's attitude and kind of work with it, and not just assume people are going to want to come in and congregate. There'll certainly be people like that, but I think we can, through suggestion, suggest that they do it more safely.
Yeah, I see.
Hi, Rose. Can I just come in on this for just one moment? I think we're at a stage where we are uncertain about this public space and how things are going to be managed in it, particularly in shopping streets, because our retail consortium in the UK has advised its big members that they should be managing queues outside of their shop entrances. And whilst this works on a retail park or a standalone retailer, if every retailer is trying to manage its queue, you might end up with 60, 100 queues in your main shopping streets. So that is chaos. So we think this actually is where place management might have to come in. And I think, going back to Giovanna's points, the management of the materials that are used in this need to be good, because we don't want people feeling they're hemmed in cattle pens waiting to go further forward. We want them to immediately see signs that they can understand. So as the task force, we have just starting to look whether we can work with the Landscape Institute, designers, planners, to devise some certain basic standards so that people feel comfortable with this. We use good signage, which is consistent, but I think actually a lot of this temporary installations may well be there in 18 months, 2 years time.
Let me share with you the photo I took in the market. If we're talking about temporary installation, it doesn't get more temporary than that. So the market manager, because you have, a place manager in that case, simply took some chalk, and this goes around the market and behind the store, and you have about 5 positions in a queue in it. Sorry, just wanted to say
excellent. I mean,
how temporary some things can be, and you have the case of a place manager, which is a market manager in this case, right? So we can think of that in a much larger scale in a town centre.
Yeah, and we've got to then start thinking about, how robust it is. Does it work? Does it make people feel safer? And does it work for the businesses?
Right. Bill, anything in Liverpool in that way?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a couple of points really. One of them is about the queues, and that is something that we are wrestling with at the moment. Is, as you say, if large stores are already got queues, once the other stores open, so we have Church Street in the centre of Liverpool, which is our main retail street, which is pedestrianised from 10 in the morning till 6 in the evening. And then, so how do you bring those queues and intersperse queues and make sure there's no conflict? I know the British people are good at queuing. We're very disciplined, but really that's the thought process about how you do that. And those the movement of those people is something that we're going to have to delineate with signage, or how we use that. That is going to have to be done for quite some time, quite rightly, as you said. So we're looking at some ways of doing that to enable people to understand. Perhaps this is an opportunity to bring some form of fast track or almost for retail. So there is an app that retailers can have that will signify what time people can come to the store. Perhaps that's a way of using the technology, and I'll just throw that one out there. But then the other thing about is how do we take back the city streets where the traffic is gone and reformat them? So we're looking at that as a live possibility in Liverpool at the moment, with some of the retail streets that are heavily trafficked, closing them permanently to traffic and allowing restaurants to come out. So if restaurants have to provide social distancing, then we can do that basically on the streets. Now, clearly Liverpool doesn't have the same weather as perhaps Greece or Spain, or but we can still do that in a protected way. And use that space to allow business to operate in a different way.
As you saw what Simon said earlier, Milan, for example, was already thinking of extending its bicycle infrastructure and speeding up the process, because that would be one way of dealing with that, right? Bill, I have another question for you that's for Liverpool, and it's very relevant also for for my country, for Greece, because there are all these islands and cruise ships. Have you thought at all about how you are going to manage that?
Well, Liverpool, as you can see, the waterfront behind me has reimagined itself as a cruise destination, and we were just about to start. Once some of the pre-commencement works can be done, there is a new cruise terminal being built in Liverpool, and in terms of cruises, we had over 100 cruise arrivals last year. Liverpool was the home of is still the spiritual home of Cunard. Cunard sailed from Liverpool 170 years ago, but the difficulty is that the cruise industry is in aspic at this moment in time. Clearly there's significant investment in cruising, and the cruise industry will come back at some stage, but how it happens safely, because our thinking in the UK is that as lockdown eases, people over 70 and those who are vulnerable particularly will be shielded now. A lot of the cruise industry is based on that demographic. So it's a major issue for us. It was a significant contributor to our visitor economy.
All right, so after talking about public space, there was a couple of questions that have to do with virtual space. It has to do with online. And how, there are all these changes, more people are shopping online now, which may create, even in the long term, some kind of a shift and speed up the decline of street retail as we know it now. On the other hand, of course, for a lot of small businesses, online was a possibility to survive. So hadn't it been for online services, this wouldn't have happened. So we're in a kind of a dilemma, right? At the moment, online allows small businesses to survive. In the long term, it could shift more business towards online in the long term. I wonder if any of you has any views on that. I know that, Simon, you've done a lot of work on this online, offline thing. Maybe you have something to say about that.
Yes, I mean, what we've seen in the UK certainly is a number of companies that have been around for a few years who work with independent retailers to try to get them online. I mean, we're not interested here in the big multinationals. It's up to them what they do, but for the small retailers to get them an online presence. And there have been two things that have been going on. One had some support from the local economic partnership in Gloucestershire to provide digital training for every retailer in a number of towns to help them put product online, to help them sell it. But what we're seeing now is a wider approach with companies helping independent retailers to get online. Many are seeing good success with it. I was talking to one retailer 2 days ago who had never been online until 3 weeks ago, and they've taken over £40,000 worth of orders since getting their presence. But what we're also getting is feedback from one of our partners in the task force who is monitoring social media. And what she's noticed in this period is that whilst us as consumers have increased our social media activity by 40% during the lockdown, businesses have decreased their social media activity, the small retailers in particular, by 28%. So whilst the theory is there and some are making it work, we have a long way to go, I think, before this is working effectively.
Right, and I have an interesting comment on that from Greece, from Elina Komninou, who talks about initiatives that she says, there has been a rise in Greece of small local producers going live with an e-shop so that they are able to sell their products online. With tourism being 21% of our GDP, they are trying to plan ahead on how they will be able to sell the products without the footfall. Delivery is very popular here, especially because of the coffee culture. But there have been numerous new apps, at least in Athens and Cyprus, for deliveries. For example, Wolt, Bolt, Box Food, Greece, to name a few. They reduced delivery costs during this time, and more restaurants and shops offer delivery who didn't before. So in a way, it says something about what you were saying too at the same time. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ares, I totally agree with Elina. Is that her name?
Yes.
This is happening here on social media, small local stores, even the ones, mom and pop stores run by elderly people that are almost going towards retirement. They are online. They make videos of the stuff they have. We have gourmet dinner deliveries, coffee, espresso delivery. We have all types of unusual deliveries that you've never thought of. And I personally have been buying local because I appreciate them posting stuff on Facebook rather than whatever. And they organize quite well. Even small farmers, they teamed up and they have a delivery network. And I would have never gone. I would have gone to the equivalent of Tesco because working, I just don't stop at the market, or I don't even know where the open market is. I'm just kidding, but I ignore it totally. And now I'm going, and they're selling very well. I think only the strong survive, and they're getting very creative. And there are very, very nice schemes that could be listed or shared that I think could give optimism to others.
All right, Bill?
Here in Liverpool, a group of entrepreneurs, independents, have set up something called the Liverpool Independent Delivery Service Limited. And it's a delivery service with local independents. So you can food produce from a cheese shop, but also the restaurants are sending. So one of our new Chinese restaurant, Luban, is sending out food packs with the product for the meal and the menu, and you can cook it yourself. But it's working very well, and that's local independent traders working together on that, delivering it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's go towards a couple of final questions, I think, that could be interesting. I mean, we're all talking about how retailers will come together with cities and rethink about the cities. The first thing is, do you think that we'll need to change the whole town center marketing strategies? So should we go in a different direction? That would be one thing that's interesting. There was a lot of talk, especially in cities that were overcrowded and over touristy, of demarketing. Would demarketing still be relevant in the future, or is it completely obsolete now? Of course, sometimes marketing is just about using big words that mean nothing, and then hijacking them. You can call it the healthy city, and then in the end, there's nothing healthy about it. The German government is again thinking of promoting the private car and the sale of private cars. So how healthy is that? Maybe some ideas in this marketing, and also marketing bubbles, but also maybe new directions in marketing and so on, from all of you who would like to give us some kind of ideas. Michael, yes, please.
So one of the great advantages of Chicago is its architectural history. And so, and we have a whole tourist industry around that. But what's nice about it is you don't have to go in any one building. You can simply walk around the loop and see, 100 different significant architectural treasures. It's also a lovely place to take a walk. It's also a lovely place to run. And so I think, marketing people to come and enjoy the loop, not for any specific purpose other than to experience the geography that is the downtown, I think is an opportunity going forward. I don't think that we will market State Street as like the healthiest high street in Chicago, but I do think our marketing images will be much more focused on images of cleanliness and us cleaning, and just, you know, everything will, that'll be the lens that we look at any photograph through, that it has to look particularly healthy. One last sort of thought on that is with regards, and you've probably all heard this, is that, you know, an airport before 9/11 was, you know, one experience, and an airport after 9/11 was still an airport, but it was a different experience, all about security. And so I think the experience on High Street is going to be pretty much the same, but there'll be this increased notion of healthy, both as a consumer and as you know, enforcers of rules and regulations around public health. And I think we just have to find a way to make that not intimidating.
Right. From the others, any ideas and changes in marketing? Yes, Bill?
Well, as we've said, marketing will be very much focused on the local rather than international, because and the international focus has been very big for us.
You mean changing the target group for marketing?
Changing the target demographics to the local, not so much even the drive time. It's very much the local city to get people back and to populate the city. So from Liverpool being a city that's very successfully marketed itself on events, some of our great street theatre with the Giants, when we've had 1 million people on the street, well, that's not coming back. And it's about celebrating. I always say that it's picking up Michael's point about the architecture, that people can come and explore the city and enjoy the space. Look at the buildings. You know, I always say, look up from the pavements to see the buildings, and we'll start doing more of that. And some of the imagery that we'll use will be around the buildings and the space, the people, and the history of the place. And I think that's more. So instead of coming to Liverpool for a great night out, well, actually, it'll be a great night out in a completely different way.
Right. And what about Berlin? Because again, thinking of the terrorist attack a couple of years ago, it was a very, very strong message in the marketing that now the Christmas market is a safe place to go, right? Because people were afraid to go to the markets after the terrorist attacks. Are you thinking at all of marketing Berlin or Kudamm, let's say your area, as that it's safe, this is a safe place for people to come into the city? Or would it make sense to make a very strong statement about how safe it is, that you're taking all the necessary measures?
Maybe that it's a good sort of marketing to do that, to be a very healthy street and look after the people and do cleaning more often and things like that. But from my personal view, it will be interesting to see Berlin in total, because I mean, we are well known as the party city in Europe at the moment, and I'm interested to see whether this will come back at all.
So some clubs are doing virtual parties in Berlin, right? They're offering virtual, I don't know how that works. But
yeah, but it can't stay virtual, and we want the economy to come back, and we want that stores have customers again. So we have to let the customers into the city. So
all right, there's so many questions, I can't take them all because you only have a couple of minutes left. Giovanna, is there anything you'd like to add, because the others have spoken?
Well, in terms of tourism, you know, our GDP, it's about 13% of our GDP. So actually, we're being reckless, but most of the eastern coast over the Adriatic Sea, they would really love not to go domestic this year. Of course, they're trying to decide all the types of safety measures to undertake in beaches. It's probably impossible in northern areas like Liguria or, you know, close to French Rivieras. Regarding cities, yes, we have totally had to demarket them, thinking Venice and Rome. Some cities were really, really pointing their interest on strengthening their marketing for tourism. Milan is one of the cases, and Turin was trying to restart. I don't think this, yes, people will be able to, walk around, but it's not going to be the same. And we're probably just going to have to change our perspectives on what a night out is, and what a museum is, and what sightseeing is. We're going to have to change our perspective, exactly as Mike was saying about airports. We changed our perspective in airports, and we'll have to do the same.
Closing up this 2-hour webinar, Simon, maybe you could help our attendees by letting them know again what kind of resources they can find online from the Institute of Place Management and how they can use them.
Certainly, yes. And quite a lot of this has been put into the chat, and we will circulate. If you look at there, we can circulate it. But the IPM website has information on the COVID framework. The High Streets Task Force has information on the COVID framework, and it's also for those who are involved in bids on the Bid Foundation website. We are on the High Streets Task Force website putting a lot of other resources that talk about the whole pandemic and the process and things that might come out of it. So all of that is free on the High Street Task Force website, whether you're a member or not. Some of the IPM stuff is for members. Just to repeat, we are running these webinars at the moment. The next one is on Thursday, which will be looking at the pre-recovery, and then the following 2 Fridays we'll look at recovery and transformation. So hopefully you can join us for that. But can I have one other thought? And that is, this is about place management in action. We're trying to use this framework to support you in the work that you're doing. And it hopefully will be that this puts a focus onto the concept of place management, that places realize really that they should have been doing this. They should be thinking about place leadership. And so part of what we're going to be doing over this time is providing training, running courses, helping people to evolve and adapt themselves as place managers and place leaders. We think when you think about things like this happening, everywhere should be doing place leadership.
Thank you very much, Simon, for this, the final words in place leadership. I would like to thank the more than 150 participants and attendees of this webinar. I would like to thank all of the speakers. I would like to thank Giovanna Codato from Ivrea. I would like to thank Romy Schubert and Viola Krecker from Berlin. Michael Edwards from Chicago, being the farthest away, and Bill Addy from Liverpool. Also, thank you very much, Shauna, for being in the background and helping with the questions and everything else. And of course, Simon, for the fantastic presentation on the framework, which I think was very, very useful. Thanks very much to everybody. You will find the recording online in the next couple of days, and the recording of the other seminars too, if you wish to follow them. Should you have any more questions, simply email us and we'll do the best to answer to as many as we can. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you in one of the next seminars.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Bye now.